Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and this week's episode is going to be extremely special. Joining us today is a beautiful soul I met on Twitter and on my podcast recently, who showed up in my life, named Rachelle, who goes by the YouTube handle Beautifully Broken. Every week we do our Sunday YouTube premieres. Rachelle has continued to show up in the chat, and I immediately noticed the compassion, attentiveness, and curiosity she had for absorbing all the information from all the survivors on the show. Having visited her YouTube page, I discovered that Rachelle is a survivor and victim of a rare and chronic medical condition called MdDS, which currently has very limited treatment options and research to even begin to understand the underlying root cause of this debilitating condition. What I did not know was that there was a part of Rachelle's story not publicly broadcasted on her YouTube channel, something even darker and more sinister than this horrific condition that literally threw her overboard and disrupted her entire life. What I learned about Rachelle in a gradual sequence of her opening up week after week in the chat is that she's also a survivor of Masonic and satanic ritual abuse. When I realized this, my heart dropped. And even though she wasn't yet speaking out publicly about her story, I told her when she was ready that she'd have a safe space here on The Imagination to share, educate, and inspire all of you who are listening to her tremendous story as we speak. The thing that made me fall in love with Rachelle is that she has been through hell in every way, shape, form, and fashion. And yet she shows up with more love, compassion, and the spirit of God in her heart than just about anyone else I've ever met. I'd never in a million years imagined what she's went through. The question I kept asking myself is, how can someone like Rachelle grow into such a loving person after all she's went through, when most people fall apart at the slightest inconvenience and take it out on everyone they know? And the answer God whispered in my ear is that it's not for me to question, it's for me to learn. And that is exactly what I plan on doing. We all can learn how to embrace God's word through our actions and how we show up. And survivors like Rachelle are going to lead the way for us to leave this world better than we found it. Rachelle is brand new to telling her story publicly, and I ask that you put away whatever you're doing and give Rachelle your utmost attention and respect. You may even want to get a pen and paper out and take some notes, because you're going to learn so much and be blown away by what you're about to hear. Without further ado, I'm honored to introduce mother, wife, survivor, woman of God, child of God, voice for the voiceless, child abuse activist, inspirational overcomer, and my new dear friend, Rachelle, also known as Tiny Dancer. Thank you so much for being here with me, Rachelle.
Oh, thank you. Of course I cried. Oh, Emma. Oh, I love your heart.
Oh my gosh.
Your intros are the best.
Oh, you are so amazing. I can't even tell you how much you captured my heart. You know, you were somebody that I hadn't met before, and I noticed your popping into my chat on Sundays. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this girl is so interactive. She's commenting all the time. She's giving feedback. She's saying prayers for the guests. She's asking really intelligent questions. And gradually over time, you know, I realized I clicked on your YouTube or your handle, and I go on your page and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this girl has a crazy medical story that, you know, is deeply misunderstood by the medical condition and world. No wonder why she's engaged with this, because she's a survivor herself with something really hard that she's going through. And I really want to talk about that. But the one thing that I loved about you was that week after week you showed up and you were so vulnerable with sharing little bits and pieces about yourself, and gradually opening up here and there and talking about this really, really crazy situation that you had as a child. And I want to dive all into that. I know that your story is you're just getting started on this public speaking journey, and the mountains that you're going to move and the lives that you're going to change is just, it brings chills down my spine and makes my hair stand up on end, just thinking about the power that you have within you and the kindness that you lead with. I always think it's amazing when somebody has every right to show up angry and hateful towards the world, and it would be so justified if that's how you wanted to live after everything that you've been through. Like, nobody would ever blame you if you wanted to show up that way, but you don't. And I just think it's so amazing. I'm like, gosh, we have so much to learn from her. So I want to start by opening up and talking about a little bit about not necessarily just your YouTube channel, but I want to talk about this medical condition, because I feel like this was kind of the start of you realizing this alternate life that you had that you weren't aware of. And this story is really interesting, and I want to bring light also to this medical condition, because I had never heard of it, and I'm sure other people haven't. And I think that that's kind of a big problem. This is something that I think deserves more attention, and I wish more people knew about it, including myself. So let's talk about that and what happened and what MdDS is.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you for this platform too, and giving a voice to the voiceless. You're doing exactly that. So so thank you. All right, so MdDS, that's short for Maulde-de-Barquemont syndrome. Maulde-de-Barquemont syndrome. So basically that translates to sickness of disembarkment. So this develops mainly in women. There are some men that get it, but it's like 98% of women that get this. And it usually occurs after a prolonged motion event, like traveling most commonly on a boat, a cruise. But some people can acquire it after a long car ride, or sleeping in a camper, or flying. And then there's people that develop this spontaneously as well. So it's very complex, but basically my story with it is that mom, wife, nurse, I was working full-time as an emergency room nurse, and I just needed a little break, and so did some of my coworkers. And so we decided to go take a short little cruise to the Bahamas for 3 days and just kind of get away from the stress of our job. And so did really well. It was my first cruise. I figured I'm usually get motion sick, so I was concerned that would be something that would happen. But the first 2 days that I was on the boat, I was totally fine. And then the final day was when my whole life just kind of flipped upside down. And I can actually pinpoint the very moment that it began. And I was standing on deck with a couple of friends, and we were talking, and my whole body just went, ooh, it looked like a wave hit me, and I went back. And I was like, whoa, did you guys feel that crazy wave? And they were like, girl, you've been drinking a little too much. We got to cut you off. And I was like, no. But no one else felt it. And I didn't really think anything of it. But shortly after that, I got so nauseous and sick and dizzy and disoriented. And at that point, we were already in port. We were spending the night in port and then debarking the ship the next morning. And so I got really ill, and I was ill throughout the whole night. And then the next morning we get up to debark the ship, and I was just really struggling to even walk. And so my friends had to assist me in walking. They had to carry all of my stuff for me. And I actually stopped by my ER on the way home from there, and I had a friend throw a line in my arm really quick. And then I went home and I hooked myself up to a couple of bags of fluid, just thinking that I was really dehydrated. Went to bed, and then the next morning I woke up and I was like 10 times worse. And I noticed when I actually like debarked the ship and got onto solid ground, it felt like someone had like grabbed my hair and was pulling me to the ground and like to the side. It was like this really strong gravitational pulling that I felt. And so I felt that for months, to the point where like I couldn't hold my head up straight. Like I had to hold my head, or I had to be pressed against like a wall, because I would feel like I'm being pulled down and sideways and being rocked up and down and side to side in every direction.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like, it's hard to kind of pinpoint or explain. The only way that I can explain it is, most people know what vertigo is, but it's like vertigo is like a spinning vertigo. This is like a up and down, side to side, front to back vertigo, all at the same time. Another way that I really like can explain it is, you go to the fair and you ride that one ride. I think it's called like the Gravitron, where you like are plastered against the wall and it spins you around and around and around. And then when you get off, like you're just off, and it takes your brain a couple of minutes to like recalibrate. That's kind of like what this feels like all the time. Like I'm always trying to gather my bearings, because my brain, so what happens is that it's in the cerebellum part of the brain, that this, what I've been explained by the researchers in New York City that I went and saw, is that it's in the cerebellum, and it's called like the velocity storage in the brain. And so it's like so this condition is like a broken record, where it's on a loop all the time. And so I receive this like oscillating type message in my brain that I'm always moving, I'm stuck on this loop. And that's what the velocity storage is. And so with mal-de débarquement, it's the brain's inability to reset back to like factory mode, land mode. And so it's like a permanent motion sickness, really, is what it is. And this researcher in New York that I saw, he's actually trying to figure out how to eliminate motion sickness. And if you can, his theory is, if you can eliminate motion sickness from the brain, you eliminate MdDS. So it's a really complicated thing, and it's actually very much attached to like hertz and frequency. Like when I went and did the treatment, I was oscillating at a certain frequency. And so he was trying to interrupt that frequency. And so he was able to interrupt the signal and the hertz, and it actually like changed, the numerical values changed throughout the treatment. It was like a week-long treatment. And this treatment's super crazy. Like they put you in a round room, and you're sitting in a chair in the middle of it. And the chair can swivel like side to side. And then he projects lights, like stripes, dark and light stripes on the wall. And they move certain directions, up, down, or left or right, depending on what sensation you're feeling. So let's say you were feeling like you're being pulled to the right. He would run the stripes going this way to make your brain go this way. And then, so that would happen. And then I'd go too far this way, and then he'd run. It was really, really crazy, very interesting. And at the same time, there was a metronome that was playing. So there was something with the sound and the frequency. And then he would stand behind me and he'd rock my head back and forth as I'm staring at these lines moving around me. So I don't know the exact science behind it. It was crazy, but it got me 50% better, because when I stepped off the boat, like I was crawling to the bathroom pretty much. Like I would walk and I would just stumble about, like I just looked like I was plastered all the time. And so I was using like canes and walkers and even wheelchair. I still like, I have to use a wheelchair in the airports because I can't handle the stimuli. I lose my balance and I fall. And so I still like, I'm still like very much battling this, but in the beginning it was 24/7 all the time. And it felt like I was on a boat in like a hurricane, like 40-foot waves, and I'm being thrown about. And I had, according to the researchers, I had one of the worst cases he had ever seen, which is no surprise to me because my life's just crazy. So I got hammered with it because a lot of times it's invisible and you don't see people actually rocking. Some do, like the really bad cases do. I was like in a wheelchair because I'm stumbling around, couldn't walk, being thrown around. And so it was, and I have a lot of visual triggers and like sensitivity to electromagnetic energy. So I struggle with like fluorescent lights and anything with like a magnetic ballast to it, elevators. Like there's still a lot of things that I really struggle with out in the world. And so I really like, I'm really choosy about what I go and I choose to participate in. And we have to plan like, oh, we're going to go out to dinner. So we have to find somewhere that's outdoor seating, and how's the weather going to be? Because I can't like sit inside because I get so overwhelmed by the sounds and the people, the motion and the noises and patterns and lights. And my brain has just like a really small threshold for stimuli. But I've been working, independently. I've been working on that now for like 3 years, and I was in vestibular rehab for like 8 months, and that really helped. He gave me a lot of tools. Like he taught me how to press my head against the wall and like my spine against like a hard surface to tell my brain like you're on solid ground, you're okay. But it's like a really strange feeling not to feel the ground under your feet as like a solid ground. It's like it's either moving or I feel like I'm floating or I'm walking on a dock or marshmallows, or it like every day is different. Some days are really bad, some days are better.
Now, is this
But
something that would have happened at some point anyways? Is this something that they believe is harbored inside of you and it'll get triggered eventually? Or is it not there at all, but you can get it in an instant? You see what I'm
um
saying?
and that's something that they're still trying to figure out. Like this, as of right now, there's no cure for this thing. There is this treatment in New York which definitely helped, but it didn't cure me. Some people go into remission, and some people don't. Some people battle it for life. I'm 3.5 years into my first episode, and some people have like 2-3 month episodes and then they're good for like years.
Oh,
So
wow. Different.
everybody's different. And there's so much that's not known about it, but there are some connections. Like there's definitely a hormonal influence because it affects mainly women. And a lot of the women, especially the motion triggered women, were around their cycle. So I actually started my period the first day of my cruise. So it was like this perfect storm of all of these different things, like these predispositions, and it took that motion event to trigger it. So another thing is there is a connection with migraines and head injuries and certain personality types, like very overachiever type personalities, people that are kind of perfectionist and highly committed perfectionist type personalities. I'm not saying everyone is like that, but there does seem to be quite a bit of that in the personality types of the people that get it. And like I said, it's women. And then the last connection, and then this is partly backed by science and then partly backed by just my own research. And that is that a lot of the people that I've personally connected with MdDS, because I started a support group, is there's trauma. There's a history of emotional trauma, whether that's linked to childhood trauma or adult trauma. And then a lot of these people were also under a lot of stress when it was triggered for them. So stress also seems to be like a trigger for it. So it was like all of these things, like I was working like a really stressful job, and and trying to balance like my health and also my family. And my youngest son has like a really rare medical condition as well, that is, his is much more life-threatening. Mine is not life-threatening, other than I wanted to not live with it. But but his is connective tissue, and it affects his eyes and his heart and his lungs and his spine and his skin and like everything. And so it's been a journey with him and with his health. And so I was just like walking around trying to appear perfect, but inside I was screaming, and I was dead inside. I was just trying to like keep my head above water, really, and then this hit me, and then my whole world, like it got much darker for a long time, because even though all of these things and these titles like stressed me out, they were also what made me feel worthy. Those were the things that made me feel like I had purpose. And so especially like other than like, of course, being a mother first and foremost, but working in the ER, like it made my life make sense there, because my brain just operates better under pressure. And so in this like chaotic environment, like that is where my brain was happy. I was so happy there. Like even though it was stressful, like it made sense to me to be there. And it kind of, in my eyes, it redeemed like everything that I'd gone through, because I was like, oh, it was training. Like it was training for this, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I'm using all of this crap stuff that I went through, and I'm doing something with it positive. So when that came crumbling down, when I got sick, like I was just like, what is my purpose at this point, God? Like I thought like you would redeem my life, and my life made sense, and now it doesn't. And haven't I been through enough?
Yeah, that's like, I hear that a lot from athletes, because our bodies kind of expire for professional sports after a certain period of time, usually, 20s, maybe 30s. And that is something too, where it's like, we can all relate to that to some degree. You find something that you're so passionate about, whether it's a hobby or something you're able to do as a job or sports, and then having that taken away from you in an instant without any planning. It's not even like you got 2 weeks to think about it, or you could just go get another job somewhere else. Or that's so hard for people who pour so much of their heart and soul in something, for it to just be ripped out from underneath them. So I can't even imagine how that felt. A lot of people might hear what your career was and be like, well, I could never do that. That sounds way too stressful. But it takes a certain person to do that. And I've met a lot of people like you who absolutely love it. They can't wait to go to work, even though it's stressful and hard and maybe
Yeah.
sad sometimes. It's
Yeah.
something that makes them light up, and it's something that they can go home and sleep after night, or after work they can go sleep at night, because they poured all that energy and that drive that they have into something meaningful. So I can only imagine how that felt, and then coming home and having to be mom and not even being able to really walk, and you have a child that needs extra attention, and that had to have just been so challenging for you, and I'm so sorry that you went through that.
Thank you. That was hard too. Yeah, just so the career gone, and then my ability to like be a mom and be even a homemaker. Like it was like I had formulated my worth and my identity based on like all of these titles and what I could do, and not like who I was, like the core of who I was. And so like I lost my mind. Like I went into such a deep sadness and anxiety. I mean, like panic attacks every day, because I like my whole world was falling apart. And then this is when like the trauma started coming out from my past, that I have a lot of repressed memories. Like I only have like a handful of memories before age 6. Like a lot of it's repressed. So I honestly don't even know half of what I've been through. Like I don't remember. But my body does. And
Did you ever, whenever you would think about childhood before any memories or before your body started remembering, did you ever think, gosh, that's kind of odd, I don't remember anything? Or did you just think, oh, a lot of people must just be like that. That's just how it is. And
yeah, the memory stuff is really, it's come up in the past few years of like, no, that wasn't normal to have all these repressed memories. And then the small handful of memories you do have are really bad. Like I knew when I turned 18 years old and I became a mom and I started taking care of a child, that is when everything clicked for me. And I was like, what I went through was not okay. Like that wasn't normal. I would never allow my son to live like that. And so I knew, and he's almost 22 now. So I knew 22 years ago, like it wasn't okay. Um, and but I just pushed it down, and I just moved on with my life. And I put all of my energy into like making a good life for me and my son. I was an 18-year-old single mom, and that's not what I imagined my life would be. But I had someone else to live for at that point. And so it changed the trajectory of my life. And I knew that I did not want my child to suffer like I did. And so bringing it back to like being sick and not being able to be a mom or a wife, and to be bedbound for so long, and then learning how to walk and going to appointments every day. And I just felt like such a failure, and I felt so lost. And I was convinced my husband was going to leave me, because I wasn't bringing any money in. I wasn't contributing to the house. I wasn't able to like be intimate. And so like I started treating him as if he had already left me. And I was mean, and I was in a really dark place, and I almost lost my marriage. And I didn't, thank God, but like I'm just trying to give you like a grid of like where I was at, is all this stuff was popping up, because the fear of him leaving was rooted to neglect and abandonment and abuse that I had been through as a child. And it all started bubbling up when I was in this really vulnerable place of brokenness, and stripped of all of these identities that I placed on myself. And I'm just me and what's left. And that's where God like reached in, and he just started piecing me back together, piece by piece by piece, and showing me like, daughter, like you're my daughter, number one. Like he just started laying these foundations of like identity, of like who I am. I'm his daughter, and I'm redeemed, and I'm loved, and I have a kind heart, and I'm compassionate. And so he's rebuilt me in the midst of utter brokenness. Like he really proved himself as a loving father and trustworthy during this time. And I had prayed, I don't know, maybe like five or so years ago, I prayed like, God, I want to trust you, but I'm struggling because mm, I didn't have a good daddy, and I don't look at you as a good daddy. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that looks like, and I want to trust you, and I don't know how, and I don't know how to put my faith in you. And it came through this utter brokenness where he reached in and pieced me back together and loved on me and just poured out so much love on me in that time, and rebuilt like the foundation of who I am, that he answered those prayers in the darkest hours of my life. And so that is kind of like when I started this journey to healing physically this illness, and then also the wounds, because I really feel like it's all connected. Your body, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's about how, yeah, how your body hangs on to trauma even if you don't remember it. And that's why you see a lot of survivors that are sick. There's a lot of us out there that deal with chronic health issues, and it's because our bodies have been through hell and back, and our bodies remember. And so I did this treatment in New York and I got 50% better, but like I know that's not God's best for me. Like I know that God wants me to be 100% better. But that's been a whole nother thing, is like, as a Christian, there's other Christians, that are like Christians. It makes it, the religious people out there that give Christianity a bad name, like, whoa, well, your faith, you just don't have enough faith for your healing. And I'm like, oh no, you have no idea how strong my faith is, but God works through things, and this is one of those things in my life that God is working through, and it's his timing and it's strategic. And yeah, I've been suffering three and a half years, and this condition sucks, but in the midst of it, he's healed so much in me over the past 3 years, and he has processed some really dark things with me, and I'm at peace. And when you can experience peace and joy in the midst of the storm, and when your circumstances aren't shouting peace and joy, like that's true relationship. And that's what it should be. It's shouldn't be about religion. It should be about relationship. And sometimes you have to be brought to your knees to come into face to face with God. And that's where I've been. And it's weird to say, like, I'm thankful for it, even though it's been hard and every day is a struggle. It's also, I have been walking around like just hollow for so many years, and now I'm broken, but I'm more whole than I've ever been.
That's
If that
funny you say
makes
that, because
any
what was going
sense.
through my head was this is a journey of going from beautifully broken to beautifully whole.
Oh,
And
I
that's
love
big.
that.
I love that
Oh,
too. And that's how I
love
see
it.
it. It's like, gosh, you're traversing there, you're so much closer than you
Yeah.
were, even despite all of this. And one of the biggest things that I love that you talked about was that loss of identity. I don't think we think about that enough. I know a lot of mothers who completely identify with being mom and worker. And when the child leaves the home, then they have to reassess and say, gosh, 18 years of my life, I never asked, who am I? What did I do before I had a child? Who was I before I had that label? We slap all these labels and layer them on us, and we end up forgetting who we are. If all of that was taken away from us, it's so important that we have that relationship with ourselves where we can say, what if every single label was stripped from me? Because that can happen. And you're an example of a big, identity crisis
Yeah.
happening, where you identified so much with your work, and a lot of us do that. But if something were to happen, who are we? How do we establish that peace and say, okay, I understand that that was a part of me, but that's not all of me, and
Yeah.
how can I take the elements of what I loved about that and maybe find a way to shift my life to doing it in a different way that is compatible with the life change, whether it's medical
Yeah.
or, if somebody has to move or they lose their job. I think it's so important. I love that you were forced to learn that, not in the way that you did, but I think that that is going to make so much difference just in general. You're going to be so untouchable. You're already untouchable, but it's like everything's been taken from you and you're still here. You're still standing. You're still able to say, I'm going to keep going tomorrow and the next day and the next day. You can take all you want and I'm still here. And the other thing that I wanted to comment on regarding that is I think a lot of us, especially trauma survivors, identify themselves with those labels so much to the point where they think, if I don't have those, I'm unlovable. Because you're brought up from, abusive parents make you feel that if you don't meet this criteria, you're no good and you're going to pay the price for it. And you're unlovable. You're nothing, you're worthless. I don't care about you if you don't excel and if you're not perfect and if you don't obey every little thing. And I think too, there's like an unraveling with having that vulnerability of saying, gosh, I'm not perfect. And I can't even fake that I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm in pain. I'm in bed. I can't move. But somebody still loves me despite that. How amazing. What a gift to be given. And you might not have understood that level of love if you hadn't had so much taken from you. You might have, not to say that you, in the back of your head, you always thought your husband was going to leave, but what a relief for you to always know and just have that solidified in your mind that no matter what happens to me, he's got me. He's here. I'll never have to wonder if something's going to happen. I know that my person is here. I know that I'm lovable despite everything that I went through. It doesn't make me who I am. It does not make me less lovable. It does not make me worthless. I'm worth everything, no matter how broken I am, and I think that those lessons, it's so painful to listen to you talk about it because it's so hard for people to even comprehend going through that. But I think no matter if you're in a situation like yours that's extreme, or if you're, living your best life, going to work every day and you're, you have a happy marriage, I think there's those lessons that we put off because we never think that that'll happen to us, where we'll be put in that situation. And I hope people listening feel inspired to say, gosh, who am I without my labels? And am I okay with being so vulnerable, stripped totally naked of all of that, and to still accept that I'm lovable that way, and that I'm no less, that God doesn't love me any less, that the people that truly love me won't love me any less. Those are such beautiful lessons to learn. And I'm sorry you had to learn them in such a hard way. But like I said, hearing that from you, it makes me reflect on myself and remind myself of who am I, and can I successfully come to terms with that I'm lovable no matter what, and that no matter what happens to me, that I know my worth isn't dependent on my work label or, if I'm a mother or whatever I'm doing. And I love that you shared that because it's just really valuable. And I think every single person, no matter what, can learn from that.
My marriage is 20 times stronger than it was before I got sick. Like it's so good. And he's always been my best friend, but it's a completely different thing. And you're so right. Like he's in it to win it. Like he's seen me at my very worst and he's stuck by my side and loved me through it, even when I was ugly and really difficult to love, and he's been so patient even throughout. Like we're going on 19 years,
Oh
and then 14 married. And um I was a mess, like when I met him, I was promiscuous and I was spiraling and I was, you know, out at the club all the time, shaking my booty and um like doing my thing. Like my oldest son's dad had him every weekend, and the weekends were mine. And and I met him, and we got into like a really it was a short relationship. We broke up, and then I go to visit my foster parents in Idaho, and I find out I'm pregnant.
Oh my
And yeah, and then so we actually didn't get back together until our son was almost 2, and those years were not, they were rocky for sure, but we both had our baggage. But what I was getting at with it is I had a lot more than like the average person, and and I played myself out to be like very fun and promiscuous and open and free. And then we get married, and I become safe with him. And all of a sudden, like all of these things that I felt like I had to do to like win him, I didn't have to do that. Like I won him, and so the realness of my like baggage kicked in, as far as like I didn't want to be touched. Like he couldn't roll over and put his arm around me in bed without me waking up and having a panic attack and hitting and kicking and crying in my sleep. And honestly, I mean, we're like in our 20s, and I don't want to be intimate, and every time he like puts his hand on my butt, I'm like want to like crawl out of my skin. And it's not because of him, it's just because of this unresolved stuff, and so like he's been exceptionally patient and loving. And like we've had our moments, and he can be a turd sometimes, we all can be, but like he's, imagine being like a newly married 20-something-year-old man and like having a wife that like doesn't want to be touched and doesn't want to be intimate and is repulsed by physical affection because it triggers her, and so
And
I'm not that.
you didn't even know why, right? Like you knew your childhood might not have been good, but you hadn't had recollection yet. So it's probably really confusing for you too, to be like, why am I
I,
like this?
well,
How can I get over it?
I do have recollection of some things.
Yeah.
um like I said, I have like a handful of memories before 6, but those memories are of rape and molestation and poverty and chaos and violence. So I have some memory, but like okay, so I'm gonna kind of get into like my parents now and just kind of like
Yeah, let's
play
talk
out
about
this
your
story.
family and some of that.
Yeah, because it's all tied together.
Yeah.
And so my mom, she was sexually abused by her brother when she was a little girl, and it was an ongoing thing. And then her mother was schizophrenic and oftentimes tried to kill her. And so my mom was very, very traumatized child. And she meets my dad. He's like 12 to 14 years older than her. And she's looking for a savior, someone to rescue her out of this really dysfunctional home. And she takes off with my dad, and my dad is a survivor of multi-generational pedophilia and rape and sodomy and incest. And he was trafficked, and his dad was trafficked. And I don't know a ton about like my family history. My dad has really left a lot of it a secret, and even down to like our bloodline and stuff like that. There's stuff there, and there's stuff that's tied to some nefarious things, but I haven't gotten any really solid straight like information. And so it's just a couple of things that he's said. But one of the things he did say is that there was 7 generations of abuse. So my half brother that raped me, he was the 7th generation to be abused. And so it goes back like a really long way. All I know about my grandfather and my dad, and this is something that I think is tied in to the bigger system, but I don't know. But my grandfather, his mother died during labor, during childbirth, and then he was given to an aunt, and she was the one that was like trafficking him to farms. And so he had a very dysfunctional upbringing. And then my dad's birth is very questionable, as far as my grandfather was in his 70s when my dad was born. And my dad was a twin, and the twin died at birth. So there's a couple of things there that are interesting that I've noticed other survivors, like there's maybe some potential connections there with that stuff. My grandfather was a Golden Gloves boxer, and he trained my dad from a little boy up to be a fighter. And my dad was very versed in like the martial arts and held like multiple black belts. And he was sexually abused by family members and trafficked. So you have 2 people that went through like severe trauma, and both of them had fractured personalities. So 2 parents with that were just totally disassociated with a lot of trauma. So you mix that together and you're gonna get a shit show. And that's exactly like what it was. I mean, to put it nicely. So that's kind of, so they come together, and my dad had already been married. He had 3 children that were, I want to say the years, as far as age wise in comparison to me, I had 2 older sisters. One was almost 16 years older than me, and then the other one was 15. Like they were only like 9 months apart. And then a brother, a half brother that was, so he, yeah, my half brother. So and I think he was about 13, maybe 14 years older than me. So my oldest half sister actually passed away of cancer, which I think is another connection.
How old was she?
She was almost 26 when she passed. So I was 10. Yeah. And that was the firstborn, although I do have other siblings out there that my dad has told me exist, but he only acknowledged 5 of us. But he actually had his first child when he was 13 because he was being raped by the nanny. So,
oh my gosh.
so yeah, like I have other siblings out there, but there's only 5 of us that are connected. And so my oldest sister stayed with her mother at about 6 years old. The 2 younger ones, my half sister and my half brother, they moved in with my mom and my dad. My mom and my dad had a son 5 years before me. So I have 1 full blood brother that's 5 years older than me. So my mom's pregnant with me. My half sister and my half brother move in with us. And then what ensues is what I've been told. I have no memories of this. This was in the womb to like age 4 or 5. And this is all from recollection from my mom and from my half sister. But basically, my dad was deeply involved with the occult. He was doing black magic, and he was doing sex magic, and he had a lot of books. My mom told me that she tried to burn these books and they wouldn't burn. And my mom came out like when she was dying and said that I witnessed abuse. I never witnessed satanic abuse that I remember anyways. Other than he was satanically, ritually abusing her when I was in the womb. He was torturing her and doing rituals while she was pregnant with me. So that's like when my abuse honestly started, was then. I don't have any memory of it. I didn't know that was going on until into my adulthood, when my mom's telling me like he was doing all this magic, and he was levitating, and he was telekinesis and telepathy, and she had gone into detail about a couple of the rituals. Fast forward to 2016, I'm uprooted, our family's uprooted from Oregon to Florida, and I'm, because of my husband's job, and God puts us 2 hours away from my half sister. Yeah, like we are separated by thousands of miles, and 20, like almost like 20 something years of not talking, and God moves me 2 hours away from her. And so one of the first things that I did here was reconnect with my sister. And she, after a while, like she started talking, and she told me about the rituals that he was doing, about the torments and the rituals that she had to witness my mother experience and hear.
Because she was older, 15 years or something like that, older than you. So she was able to.
Yeah. So, you know, she was talking about being raped in the middle of pentagrams and, you know, and stuff like that. And it was the same stuff that my mom told me. And so in 2016 is when I learned like fully the full extent of and not even fully, because, you know, there's a lot of block stuff that I've had some dreams that I think were more than dreams and more memories than dreams. But yeah, I'm totally like blocked. I don't remember that part of my life. But it was, I mean, it happened. My sister and my mom's stories completely collaborated several years apart from one another, you know. And so that's when I learned like that it was more than just like physical abuse and emotional abuse. Like it went a lot further than that. So at that, I was born in the Denver, Colorado area, which was another piece that like kind of I connected the dots. Like I've connected a lot of my dots on your show and like through the chat and stuff, you know, like hearing of these different locations and being like, okay, well then that totally makes sense of like why we were there and why then we went to the next place and then the next place. And so all these survivors coming out and sharing their stories are helping me like piece together like my puzzle of my life. And so I'm really thankful. So we had a home. My husband or my dad had like a career. Apparently he was a stonemason and a landscaper, and they were super successful and doing really well. And then something happened. And we fled Colorado, and we went to Arizona. And that was according to my sister, like my sister and my half brother and my mom all were working at a restaurant, like busting their butts, you know, trying to like store up money so we could get into a place. And my dad was spending it on drugs and alcohol. And so we were homeless. And we lived in variations of different things. My sister told me we lived in a bus, and I briefly remember the bus, and I remember I had a Teddy Ruxpin, and I remember that it was burnt up in a fire, and I was devastated because that was the only thing like that I had. And I remember just that sliver of memory. That's it. You know, my sister's kind of helping me like put the pieces together. And so we lived in a bus at one point, and then we would walk across the street to the gas station and like brush our teeth and like wash our faces for school. And that's like how we bathed. And then at one point we did get into a single wide mobile home, and that is where my first memories of abuse started. And that was my half brother. He would volunteer to give me baths at night, and he, you know, would start like aggressively washing me. And then it progressed to like him inserting bars of soap inside of me and just really sick things. And then from there, it totally progressed to, I have one memory of the very first time that he raped me. I just remember crying. I remember crying out that it hurt. And then that's all I remember. After that, like the memory is gone. And I know that it continued. The abuse continued for a long period of time, but I don't have memories of these rapes. I know they happen, but I don't. And I thank God like for that protective mechanism that he puts in our brains as children to disassociate from that, because it really has spared me a lot of stuff, a lot of extra trauma, which you know, it could come out. But I think that, I mean, he's already proven so much. Like he's been so gentle with this that I have no doubt like he's not going to continue to be gentle in how things are presented to me. And I have no doubt that I won't be able to get through those things. I think I've done a really big bulk of my healing already. Like I know I have some to go, but like a lot, I've done a lot of healing over the last several years. So after that, my sister started talking about the abuse that my dad was doing. And he sent her off to a girls' home. And he made her whole family believe she was a pathological liar. And I grew up thinking my sister was a pathological liar and a troubled child. And that's why she was sent off to a girls' home. And then apparently the abuse that my half brother was doing to me, that got out. And so he was sent to Florida to live with his mom. And so then at that point, it's just me and my brother and my mom and my dad. And it was a lot of like just chaos and violence and just extreme poverty. And we lived in a van at one point, and I remember like living off of like melted peanut butter, you know. And imagine like being a homeless child like in the Arizona desert in a van, like living off of melted peanut butter.
I can't imagine. I lived in Las Vegas for 13, 14 years, and that heat is no joke. It is not something you want to be even outside for a moment, much less stuck in a van.
Yeah, and then I think at one point we were even in a tent, and then we found like a little camper trailer. And I remember this camper trailer because it was like we were in an RV park, or not an RV park, like a trailer park. And there was like a set of apartments at the front of the trailer park. And we had a neighbor that befriended my parents, and he started grooming me, and he touched me one day and I ran out of the camper, and then nothing happened for a while. And then he came over one night. My parents just happened to be gone. He knocked on the little camper door and it was just me and my brother. And he asked me if I wanted to help him go paint the little apartments at the front of the trailer park. And I went, and he, motioned for me to go paint a corner in the room. And I went over there, and he got on top of me, and he raped me. And again, like, I disassociated then as well. Like, I remember right before, I remember right after, but I don't remember during. And then that led to us fleeing Arizona. And from there, I think I was about almost 7, maybe. We end up in Northern California, at the head of Lake Shasta. So the Shasta area, yeah, in Northern California. And we lived in tents, and eventually we got a bread truck. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off this alerts that keep going off on me. So we end up getting a bread truck, and a metal bread truck. And we park it on top of a mountain, up in the, Shasta area. Like, there were a couple of houses like on the mountain, like at the base of the mountain, there was like a little RV park. And then there were some houses, and one of the houses was like a crack house that we hung out at. And then along the way up the mountain, there was a couple of houses. And then there was a really sweet elderly couple that was about a half a mile down from where our bread truck was. And they had a water spigot, and they would let us fill up our jugs in their water spigot. And that's how, like, we had water. And my dad had a couple solar panels, so we had like basic electricity. And he like rigged a phone line that went through the window of the bread truck. And we spent like several years up on top of that mountain. And
were you going to school during this, or how? Yeah.
I
Did
was.
ever
And
ask, like, hey, is everything okay?
there were at this particular school in Northern California, like the schools in Arizona and Colorado, like no questions asked about anything. And there were clear signs of, I was falling asleep in class in like first grade, kindergarten. Like, that's not normal, like, to be doing that. And I was really underweight and dirty and filthy. I had all the signs of abuse. And then, yeah, in Northern California, there was a little elderly lady that she was like an administrator at the school. And I remember like her and her husband would have me over like a couple days a week after school, and they would bathe me and feed me. And they clearly like recognized like there was a need, but was anything ever investigated? No, never. But the takeaway from that is, like, all throughout my life, God has placed people in my life to love on me and to care for me, in the midst of being like so neglected. I recognize like all of these little things throughout my life where God, showed himself, through other people. He loved on me through them. And so
That's a beautiful way to look at that.
yeah. Yeah. And so my brother ended up getting satanically abused by a member of the church in that particular town that we were in. And he ended up having some behavioral stuff from that, and he actually took a lot of that out on me. Like he would just physically just beat the snot out of me. He broke my nose when I was like 8. And then there was some molestation that did happen. You know, and that's something that I'm still close with my brother. That's not a conversation that we've ever had. I kind of always had this understanding, like with him in particular, because I know, you know, I just knew like he was just so hurt and wounded, and that this was learned behavior. Like I innately knew that as a little girl. Like I never harbored any bitterness towards him, you know, but it's not a conversation that we've had. And he didn't not abuse me like nearly as horribly as my other brother did, but there was, you know, he's kissing and stuff like that. Like that's not normal, you know, like, so, so anyways, he ended up in a boys' home, and I think he was in that, boys' home that, Boys Town
Okay.
in Northern California. And I think there might be some connections with Boys Town and, as well. I don't know.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah, but while he was gone, my mom finally left. Like throughout my life, she tried to leave a couple of times. And I remember one time in particular is when we were living in the white van in Arizona, and she was trying to take us and she was trying to leave, and he grabbed a gun and he held it to his head, and he walked around to the other side of the van and he shot it off.
Oh my
And
God.
he made us believe that he had killed himself. And of course, me and my brother just completely like hysterically like, and she didn't leave, you know, because
It traumatized her.
yeah. And so she finally got brave enough to leave. And it was when we were living on top of the mountain in Northern California. And when she left, I remember I was there. I remember it so vividly. And like she ran down that mountain, like she ran for her life, and he chased her. And it was by God's grace that she got away.
And so then she left you guys there.
I was alone. It was just me because my brother was gone. He was like in a boys' home. And
What a horrific
so
decision to have to make, you know? If I get away, it means I have to leave my children.
yeah.
And your mom was such a, like, she fits the profile for that vulnerable person to be susceptible to get into that situation. So sad.
Yeah. It is. My heart breaks for her when I think about, you know, what she like went through throughout her whole life. And even when she finally found happiness, she never had like really experienced like freedom. Um so it's just me and my dad at this point, and he was really involved with the crackheads
Oh my
down the mountain, and they had gotten themselves mixed up with the cartel. And so he was gone for days at a time protecting them, and he would leave me alone at the top of this mountain with a loaded 32 revolver.
And your melted peanut butter.
No, this time it was potato flakes, but
Oh my God. You
can't help
sweet, precious child. I just try to
it.
think of that. It just seems like something that would be in a movie. Like I can't imagine being so young and being like, here's your gun, here's your potato flakes. I'll see you in a few days. Like, okay, Dad, bye.
He
Precious child.
nothing about like my childhood, even like the good times weren't normal, because the good times were like training. You know, he was always training me. preparing me. Like he taught me how to fight. And the reason he left me with a loaded gun was because he taught me how to use it. And he was always showing me things. And I do believe that this was his way of really loving me. He was like, these are the little bit of tools that I have, and I'm going to give them to you because I love you. You know, even in the midst of such like mental and spiritual like illness, like I know my dad loved me. He loves me still, like, and I love him. That's so, it's just so, it's hard. It's a really hard, you know, to be in a family like this where your father is a pedophile and a rapist and a monster, but he's your dad. And I do have good memories with him too. Like, you know, he used to sing to me, and he had like this beautiful voice. And you know, we would be so poor, and yeah, we were poor because he was spending his money on drugs, you know, but like I remember like I saw this dress and I wanted it so bad. It had a hula hoop in the bottom of it, and I was like, I want the pretty frilly dress with the hula hoop. And he got it for me, and I mean, it was filthy dirty and I wore it every single day, but like he wanted me to feel like a princess. And so there were those things too, you know, where I'm like, that's my dad and I love him and I hate what he's done, you know, but I love him because I see his heart. And now that I've been healed too, and Jesus is really like inserted himself in all of this stuff, that like I'm able to see the beauty in things, and I'm able to see him through the eyes of Jesus. Like I feel God's heart for my dad. And yeah, he's made
That's
a lot of
that's
really,
like the missing piece that I think people who haven't gone through that, it's always a battle for me when I put out these stories. People who haven't gone through something like that, their immediate reaction is kill them all. We need to kill them. Screw all these pedophiles. And yes, they do deserve to have consequences for their actions. Maybe some of them do actually deserve the death penalty or to die, you know, but I personally have never had a survivor on my show that has wished that on the family member that did that to them. They might be able to say, yeah, I hate that person, they're not in my life anymore, if that's what it came to. But I've never had somebody say, I wish they would die, I want to kill them, or I wish somebody else would. Because you do, like, that's the hard thing with abuse. That's the challenging part, is it's not 24 hours a day. You do see these moments of humanity within somebody that's so dysfunctional, you know. And the hard thing to recognize is that, you know, John Paul Rice, he's one of the best people that talks about this part of his story with how he came to forgive his parents, is realizing that they were born an innocent child, and that God loved them with all his heart, and God never wanted them to have to go through what they did to make them into the adult that they became, you know. And I don't think anybody would be born and choose that. You don't ever see a child that says, oh, I want to grow up and be a pedophile and, you know, abuse my children. Like, all children are born innocent, they're born a child of God, you know. It's something happens in their life to make them that way. And I hate, like, I don't have empathy for what people do, but I do think we need to look at the root cause of what makes somebody like that, and how do we learn from that to make sure it doesn't continue happening, instead of just kill everybody. Like, that doesn't solve the problem. We need to understand the problem, make it humanize people, and recognize that, you know, there's things wrong within them that made them do really bad things, and it wasn't what they wanted for themselves. It's something that your dad didn't. That's probably how his parents had no idea how to love him either. Neither did the parents that came before them. Or they're like 7 generations of these habitual habits. Your dad never had a chance of understanding what real love was. But I love that you're able to see that he, despite everything, that there was still that bit in him, that innocent child that was born, that was saying, you know, look at me, like, I'm hurt, I'm traumatized, and I want to love you, but I have no idea how.
hurt people, and I saw that child actually, that hurt, traumatized child. He, throughout my whole life, there's been people that have come forward and said, your dad hurt me. And he's always, it's always been like they're a pathological liar. They're not telling the truth. And he's really super smart and super manipulative. And so it it's hard to it's really hard to process, that being your dad, and not only forgiving him for like what he's done to you, but like what he's also done for others, but or done to others, and also forgiving him for the things that I don't remember that I know he did also. So it's been a really long like process of forgiveness, but I was able to see him last year. I brought him out to visit, and he's got other children here. He's got my half sister here, and he's got my half brother here, and I haven't seen my half brother since the abuse. My sister hadn't seen our father since her abuse, and my sister and we came together, and we've been healing together for 6 years now, and processing together, and it's been absolutely like amazing and beautiful. And she's like one of my best friends, and she's so incredibly strong and amazing. But I facilitated a meeting for him to see his kids, because my dad has dementia. He's sick. He doesn't have a long time left. And I have known for several years that God's heart for my family is redemption. And so I knew that this was the time for that redemption for this part of our family. And so I facilitated a meeting despite knowing I was going to have to face my monster, my abuser. I mean, my dad was my abuser too, but I have no memory I do remember physical being beaten by him and the mental stuff, but no SRA. Like, I don't have any memory of that. But so I faced my brother, my sister faced my father. And when it was all said and done, me and my dad came back to my house. And all these years, he's denied. Even when me and my sister reconnected, he's like, don't believe anything your sister says. She's a pathological liar. And I'm like, yeah, no, you are, but okay. So that day, like when it was all said and done, like he looked at me and he's like, I'm so proud of you because you faced your monster today and you did it with such grace. And I'm really proud of you. And he said, but I want you to know that you're not the only one that faced their monster. And your sister did too, and everything that she's told you is true. And I looked at him and I saw this broken little boy. Just broken. And I saw so much shame. So much shame. And that was the first time he's ever really spoken anything true to me, and then other than that, all the information that I get is, I don't know what's true. I don't know what's not. He has different personalities, and one personality says that he was a Mason, and then the other personality says he hates Masons. So I'm like, but I do know the witchcraft and the occult and the mind control. I do believe that he was from Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, not very far from Harvard. And he hasn't said anything but that they did something to him at Harvard. That's all he said. He won't give me details. And I think that there's connections there. He's one of his elders said that he was sent by the government to go to Vietnam to do intelligence. And that's all he will tell me. He won't tell me anything else. Um, and again, it's like, what's mental illness and what's actually true? I don't know. But I do know that I have all of these like parallels with all these other survivors, these little connections. And I'm like, okay, so I'm like trying to piece everything together. I just know what I've been told and what's been validated, through corroborating stories between my mom and my sister. And then my own experiences, and so there's still a lot of like mystery and involved in like my story. But I do know what I know is, he was deeply, deeply submerged into high level occult to the point where, he was levitating and astral projecting and stuff like that. So it had to have been
Very high level.
very high level stuff. And speaking of, let me get back to my story. So finally, so he's involved with these crackheads. I'm on top of the mountain by myself. We go, and this happened for like, I think it was throughout the summer. So it was like a few months where I was like alone a lot with this gun. And then we went to the gas station, and my dad had gone into the convenience store, and I got out of the car and I was walking around the car. And a group of 3 men, like in a vehicle, pulled up next to me and waved their gun at me and told me to get in the car. And my dad ran out with his weapon drawn, and they took off. And he, at that point, realized like it, they almost got me at that, and I was not safe whatsoever. And so he reached out to a couple that he had met at a church. So he was very much like a part of the occult, but he also had the side of him where he, would go to church and he would read the Bible, and, and so it was very confusing, like religion and all of that was very confusing for me. Because I didn't see a healthy model of like what a true like follower of Christ like looks like, and so I had to find like my own way, my own personal relationship. And that's where things like were transformed when I got out of that religious like damage and stuff that I was bound to, and was able to actually just like let myself have a relationship with God. And then everything changed when it became a relationship. So he had met these people. He didn't know them very well, but he knew they were safe people. And he called them and said, I cannot keep my daughter safe. I'm in the middle of a divorce, and there's no place for my daughter to go. And can you take her? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And they had moved to Idaho, and they bought me a plane ticket and they flew me there. And I was almost 11. And my foster mom told me when I got off the plane, I was wearing Daisy Dukes, a bikini top. Mind you, I'm 10 years old, almost 11. I'm wearing Daisy Dukes and a bikini top. And my hair was like almost down, like past my butt. And it was just ratted and stringy. And I hadn't had a shower in God knows how long. And that's how I that's how I came to them. And I actually spent like the first 3 days there sick, throwing up. When I get like really stressed, I do this like cyclical vomiting. And I usually have to like go to the ER and get like IV meds to get it to stop. That actually developed that was the first time it happened, and it's happened several times since during really traumatic like events. I'll get in this cyclical vomiting stuff. So that's another issue that yeah.
Did you,
So
did you know this couple? Had you met them before? Was this just like
I
brand new people and you're like, what in the world is going on right
I
now?
had met him like once. I remember they like invited us over because they were just those kind of people, like they saw a need and they just want to help people. Like they're just absolute saints. They're such good people. So I like had like a vague memory of meeting them, but no, like I really didn't know them. And so I was terrified. And, she's told me like in hindsight, like, you were like a little feral child, Rachelle, like I was like one of the first things she wanted to do was to cut my hair and cut my nails. And I had never had my nails trimmed, and I had never had like a real haircut. And
Oh,
so like I thought she was killing me. Like I flipped out. I was absolutely traumatized by the whole thing. And so I was a really broken child when they got me. And these people were, um, they believed in laying hands and praying, and they believed in the power of prayer and how, you that can, the power of the name of Jesus can break every bondage, all the bondage and every single chain. And so they went hard after it for like 2 years of just steadfast contending and praying over me and over my life. And I honestly, like, like you said earlier, like, you wouldn't even know, like, it by looking at you, like, that you experience so much. And I'm like, because prayer works. I am like a walking, living, breathing
miracle.
testimony, miracle that prayers work. And it was the prayers of those people that changed my life and changed the entire direction of that my life would go. And God worked through them and moved through them in powerful ways over those 2 years. And I honestly believe that that intervention is truly like what saved my life. Because my siblings, they didn't get that intervention. And my sister, she's the first to admit, like, she used to be a crack whore. Like that was the road she went down. She
Road a
was a
lot of
crack whore.
survivors go down if they
Yeah.
don't experience an intervention, you know?
And then my brother, like he joined the Aryan Brotherhood, and he was a part of that for several years. And he's the angriest little man you ever did meet. But but he deep inside, like he hasn't dealt with all of his stuff, and so um he's still very much puffed up, like prideful, and like, don't mess with me because I'm a tough guy. And because he has been really hurt, especially by other men, when he was a teenage boy. Like I couldn't even imagine. Like I'm so glad that mine happened so early in life, because I feel like, yeah, it's not okay either way, but it's not different. I don't want to say different, but there's a different understanding that comes with it when you're older and you know what's happening to you, and so
And even the differences between how men and women, internalize things. We're so different gender wise too, with how abuse affects us.
yeah, yeah. And so he went down the anger road for a long time. And I'm the only child that has teeth. They
You have
all
such
lost their
beautiful
teeth.
teeth, beautiful smile. Oh, your poor brother and sister. Oh
I
my
know, I
goodness.
know. They're amazing though, and they're both born again Christians, and so is my dad. My dad has submitted his life to Christ, and yeah, there's stuff, that he's not owned yet, and that's his, that's between him and God. I fully believe, I mean, God is a God of justice, and I fully believe in justice. That's what's like so hard for me. It's like this tug of war of like justice, like all of these people deserve to have justice 100%.
Yes.
So I want to see that for them, but at the same time, like, I don't want to see my dad, he's like in his late 70s, and he has dementia and multiple personalities, and he's a mess. He's always been a mess, and like, I don't want to see him spend the rest of his life like in a prison cell, so it's really hard. It's so hard. Like, it really is hard
And that's,
spot to
like I
be in.
said, we all want justice. It's not about, and having anger towards people that have done horrible things is 1,000,000% justified. We should be outraged that there's people doing this to children, teenagers, adults,
Yeah.
adults abuse adults. You saw it with your own mother and father,
Yeah.
The thing that I just hope people understand is that a lot of times this is somebody's mother or father or brother or grandmother, and it's somebody that, despite having done horrific things, you still love them, and you still want, I love how you say redemption, and I hope people aren't misunderstanding that for me to say have compassion and empathy for what they're doing. It's not that. I just think when you're on the outside, because that's how I used to feel, and I still do, that's my first reaction, is just screw these people, put them on death row and get rid of them, but what does that do? Where's the understanding of like what happens, and that there's somebody out there that loves this person, and that we need to understand the dynamics of what you go through. We need to really listen to survivors. We need to listen to how it is from your eyes, instead of our emotional reactions to what we think should be done, and it's not just as simple as justice and kill them and throw them in jail. It's not just that simple. It's a very, very, very complex issue in our society. What do
And
we
it's usually multi-generational. That's the thing, is generational curses are so real, but so is the power of the blood of Jesus to break those curses. But they're very real. And like, he was a victim himself, and he became an abuser, and then he created more victims, and then those victims became abusers. And it stopped with me, though. Hallelujah, it stopped with me. I didn't become an abuser. My children were never abused. Like, it stopped with me. And I thank God for that. And I truly believe that, like, that's the purpose. Like, the biggest purpose in my life was to come here and understand my authority in Christ, and understand and have that closeness and that relationship, and to be able to wield the word of God and appropriately, to be able to do spiritual battle, because we are in a spiritual war. And there has been a war raging in my family for generations. And the devil's been after my bloodline for a really, really long time. And for a long time, he wreaked havoc in my family, but it stopped with me. And it's done. It's not going to continue. And it stopped with my sister. Her children were not abused. And so, unfortunately, I don't know, like, if my half brother continued to abuse his kids. I don't know. I hope not, but that's between him and God too. I pray not. Our family is so fractured and fragmented, that I truly believe like God is restoring my family. And I saw a huge redemption and restoration in and between my mom, my dad, me, and my brother, when my mom was dying and she was on her deathbed. And we all, traveled to see her. And the four of us, we prayed together, and we worshiped God together, and we laughed together, and we cried together. And it was like that moment of like a full circle of, this was a family that was very much ravaged by mental illness and by demonic forces and violence and chaos and abuse of every kind. And here we are, we're able to sit together as a family and pray together and laugh together and worship together. Like that is the power of God, And that's what I want people to see from my story, is that there's no family that's too broken. There's no person that's too far gone that God can't like reach in and heal and save and restore. And I'm living proof of that. I should be an absolute disaster. And well, I kind of am in a way. Like my health is all over the place. But here, like spiritually, and here, like I'm not. And that's because of the grace of God in my life, that many prayers were answered. And my foster parents they never stopped praying for me, and they continue to pray for me and for my kids. And I truly believe, at the end of all of it, like my family is going to be redeemed, and and all of the curses are broken, and my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren are going to walk in freedom.
And I love how you said it stops with me. That's something, whether you're a generational trauma survivor or whether you just had some dysfunctional things growing up, or, super high emotions, or were really stressed. That is the biggest gift that we can give the world, is saying, how do I become the person and the leader and the parent that I wish existed in the world? And if I have children, or if I'm around children, or if I know children are watching me, we're going to be around children somehow, some way. How do I become the best example for that child? So they're not traumatized. And so they're not continuing to have this cycle perpetuate the generation after them. That's really like the root. And I love that that's like, you have figured that out. What is that root? And how do I attack that? And how do I better myself so my children don't have to go through what I did?
And it's I contend for them daily. It's not a one and done kind of thing. The enemy has been hard after my family for generations, and it didn't stop. Like he's only gone harder, like we've been attacked so much, but so the contending, it's daily. It's every day. I'm covering my kids in prayer. Don't ever stop praying for your family and for your kids. And my husband he's not a believer, and I've been contending for his salvation for 19 years, and to bring this kind of full circle, like when was I inspired to come out with my story? It actually started about 15 years ago, right before me and my husband were getting ready to get married. And at the time I didn't know what it was. Now I know that it was a vision that I had, but at the time I didn't know what it was. All I saw, God gave me a glimpse of the future me. And the future me was, I was on a stage and I was wearing a dance leotard and some leggings. And I was walking confidently like across the stage, and I'm sharing my testimony. And then I start to dance. And as I'm dancing, people are being set free from hearing my testimony, and me releasing like healing through my dance. Like people were being set free. And actually the people in the auditorium, it was all like women and young girls and young women. And so I saw like the future me, and I saw myself healed, and I saw myself walking in authority and walking in power and walking boldly and courageously and confidently. And I said, that who I want to be. And that's when I really started actively healing. And so it took, I mean, we're talking like over 10 years of active like healing for me to get to a point of forgiveness. And I've forgiven my dad, and I've forgiven my half brother, and forgiving both of them it's been an ongoing thing. It's like, honestly, it's almost daily where I'm like, I forgive, like, I forgive you, I forgive you. And then, you wrestle with it sometimes, especially when you find more and more stuff out, and you have to continue to choose to forgive. And it's hard. And I wrestle with it. Everyone does. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with, if you're not there yet, there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, it has to come through a genuine process. Like, because I told myself I forgive for 10 years before I actually forgave, and so actually with my half brother, it was a miraculous thing. Like, I was really having a hard time like forgiving. And I was given a vision. Like, God really speaks to me through visions. And I was given a vision of the bathroom that I first remembered my abuse in, and Jesus was sitting on the side of the bathtub, and his head was in his hands, and he was weeping for me. And I had been asking, like, for so many years, like, where were you, God? Like, in the midst of all of this stuff, when the stuff is happening to me, like, where were you? And in that moment, he showed me where he was. He was with me. He was there with me, and he was weeping for me, and he was protecting me. And so in that moment, I forgave my brother, like my half brother. I had been battling for years to let go of the bitterness and the resentment. And in that moment, not only did I forgive him, but I had compassion in my heart for him. I was able to see him through a different lens. And that's the power of Jesus right there. The love of Jesus that can transform a heart in a matter of a moment. And so that was a really, really powerful thing for me. So it was, I started about 15 years ago. And then I got sick, and it just kind of like, I was nursing, I was doing my nursing career, and I was a mom, and I was a wife. And so like, I kind of just like tucked everything. I said, okay, I've forgiven, like, I'm good, and I kind of just tucked everything like back away. And then, I get sick, and then it just completely like surfaces like all of this stuff, that these behaviors, these, fear responses that I was having. And it really woke me up to, wow, Rachelle, like, you really, like, there's some stuff that you're still carrying, and God like wants you to have freedom. And so I feel like I've been on this journey, now for 3.5 years of not just like healing my body, but really like healing my spirit, my soul, and focusing on that. And if the rest of the healing comes, then I'll be amazing. But you know what? If it doesn't, I still have faith, and I'm still have hope, and I can still experience joy and peace, even if I don't get my healing until I'm in heaven with the Lord. Like, I'm okay with that at this point. I'm not claiming that for my life. I truly believe that God's best for me is 100% healed, and I believe that I will get there, but I'm not going to put a time frame on it. I'm not going to put a timeline on God, because we know that he don't roll like that. He's got his own plans, and I've submitted my life to that. And I'm okay if my story is that, I battle with this illness for the rest of my life, then I'm going to do it with dignity, and I'm going to do it with grace, and I'm going to touch the world in the process, and and help whoever I can, because we're not given these things like for them to go to waste. Every single thing that I've been given, good or bad, was meant to teach me something, and for me to carry it and turn that into something. And I choose, to turn that into something positive. And there's a lot of people that choose the other way, but I just, that's just not me. That's not my character. It's interesting because, my dad, like, he had so many character flaws, and he, like, his not rational in what he did, but he was fiercely loyal and fiercely protective, um in some ways, and he would lay his life on the line for anybody. I mean, except me. I'm just kidding. I mean, he did, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and those are things, that good characteristics that he taught me. Like, he did pass on good things to me, and even through the bad things, like, I became a better person because of it. You know, so I don't take any, I don't regret or relent on any of my experiences at all, because they all, they're all tied together for a purpose, and a good purpose. It says in God's word that he works all things together for the good of those that love him, and I do. And he's already shown me so much how he's worked things all together for my good, even in the midst of being sick. I've there's been I've seen so much of the goodness of God in the last 3.5 years of my life. And I wouldn't have had my eyes open to be able to recognize that any other way. Everything happens for a reason.
That's so beautiful. And I want you to talk about the dancing, because as you're dancing your way from beautifully broken to beautifully whole, I think that this part of your story is so neat, how it ties into everything, and kind of how that has been a theme in your life for a long time. And it's not, it's reoccurred miraculously through all this.
Yeah. So when I was little, like, I've always loved to dance, and we were poor, so dance lessons weren't really like an option. And so I started dancing in college, when I was a single mom, and I was starting to pursue my nursing career, like, degree, and I needed to take some, the electives. So I took a dance class, and I just fell like head over heels in love. And I was like, I was meant to do this. Like, where has this been all my life? And so I started pursuing dance with everything in me. And I joined a company, and I danced with them for like 12 years. And then I became really, really close with the owner. And then I ended up becoming the manager of the studio. And this dance group ended up transitioning like halfway through into like a faith-based dance company. And it was a really large studio. We had like over 200 students. It was a large studio.
Wow.
And absolutely, like, loved it. Like I said, I did it for like 12 years. My two younger boys, like, they grew up in the studio, and so then I knew that wasn't, there was something else in my life that I knew that I was supposed to do, and that was nursing. And everything in my life like, even when I was trying to run away from it, that stuff followed me everywhere I went. I was having, like, before I was even trained as a nurse, like, I was put into all these different scenarios of having to intervene. Like, one little girl, like, was blue choking on a pear, and I dislodged that. And then um there were some car accidents and stuff like that like I rolled up on. And then the big thing was in 2005 with Kate, the man that drowned out at the lake. And I mean, this guy he was 18 years old. He was 6'6", I believe. He was at the bottom of the lake for 10 minutes before we were able to find him. And then I jumped in and started CPR with another guy. And we did CPR for about 20 minutes before we got a pulse. So altogether, this guy was gone for like 30 minutes total. He had no heartbeat for 30 minutes and he came back. We brought him back with CPR and he ended up living with 0 brain damage. And I mean, total, it's a total miracle. Like I've experienced so many miracles in my life to say 100% God is real. God is so real. Yeah, so I forgot where I was going with that though. Yes, so I was dancing, but then like all these crazy situations were happening that were pulling me towards nursing. I jump in, I do CPR on this guy. I used to be a lifeguard, that's how I knew CPR. And that was kind of like a defining moment in my life where I was like, I have what it takes to become a nurse. And that was oddly natural for me to like kick into like robot mode, you know, and just do it.
Warrior. Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to do something with this. And then my son was born with all of these health complications. And I was like, I need to be able to recognize if things aren't okay with him. And that was like the final push for me, where I went into nursing school. And then I went down that direction and I quit dancing. I was just doing like recreational, like Zumba classes or whatever, and pursuing my nursing and everything else. And then, you know, fast forward to 2019, I get sick. I'm in vestibular rehab, learning how to walk again. And my physical therapist noticed, you know, that there was this connection with movement and motion and stability for me. And so at the time I was very ataxic. I couldn't really walk without like this jerking kind of motion and stumbling. And so what's it doing?
There we go.
Yeah. And so he noticed during therapy, you know, I'd go from very ataxic and stumbling around, and then we'd start to get some momentum and we're walking and all of a sudden like my movement becomes more fluid. And he's like, okay, you know, this is like your brain is opposite, right? Like you sense motion when you're not in motion and you get motion sick pretty much. Like that's how it is. And then, but when you're in motion, you don't feel motion because your brain is stuck in this motion cycle. And so when you're actually in motion, they are one, like they're cohesive. But when I'm not in motion, but my brain is sensing motion, there's this you know, conflict in my brain and in my body. And so that's what makes me like really dizzy and nauseous, and like I'm really forgetful. Like I've really bad like brain fog, cognitive type issues that I deal with on a daily basis. So anyways, when I notice like when I'm driving in a car, I feel better and I even can think a little bit clearer. And so my physical therapist was like, we just got to keep you in motion, you know? And so he's like,
What a thought. You think that that would make you even more unstable to try to balance when you feel unbalanced. That's interesting that it's like, it connects in your brain that you're balanced if you're moving when you feel out of balance.
Yeah, it's the weirdest. It's so weird, but my whole life's been weird. So it's really not a surprise to me at all. So he said, you know, is there like a dance studio that you can maybe connect with, that you can, you know, rent or something and do like 1 day a week of like dance therapy? And I was like, yeah. I knew of a studio that I did Zumba at before I got sick, and I called them up and asked if I could rent the studio, and they're like, no, you can use it and here's a key and come anytime you want. And so I've been rehabbing myself at this dance studio now, like for, almost 3 years. And it started with me literally walking in there with a cane and just putting on praise and worship music and moving my body. And I've been pleasantly surprised with what I've been able to do and how much I've been able to heal through that. And it's like a multi-dimensional healing too, because there's this neuroplasticity with music and with movement that I'm connecting. And so it is therapy for my brain, and it helps desensitize my brain to in all the instability. But it also was, I like to call dance like it's prayer in motion for
Oh,
me.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And so during that time when it was really dark for me and I was like, I can't, like, I don't want to live. Like, will you please just take me off this earth? You know, he made it pretty clear to me, like, there's still a purpose for my life and he's not done with me here. Um, and he just asked me, like, just, even if you don't believe it right now, Rachelle, like, even if you don't believe what these songs are saying, I want you to partner with them. And because they're decreeing and they're declaring hope and faith and healing and love. And that's what I want you to come into agreement with. I don't want you to come into agreement with what the doctors are saying, that number one, like, your life is ruined and you're permanently disabled. No, you're going to come into agreement with the goodness of who I am. And so that's what I started doing. And I started dancing and partnering with these songs, and it just started restoring my soul. It started bringing light into, such a dark place for me. And I really started to begin to believe, what these songs were saying. And I was praying through with motion, and it's been really beautiful. And I've gotten to a point now, like, where I'm teaching on days when I feel okay. Like, I teach on a voluntary basis for this studio, and I love it. I love teaching. I teach dance fitness classes and Zumba. And it's just given me a little bit of somewhat of a normalcy to my life, because my life is anything but normal, and it's given me like a source of joy. Like, it really has. And I don't put all my worth into that. I don't wrap myself into that, but it is a source of a joy for me. And it is a place where I socialize, because I'm very selective about where I go, because my brain is just so sensitive. So, it's brought, like, just a really beautiful thing into my life. And then, yeah, so dance has been something that God has used. And then even like art, like, I was trying to get creative with how to distract myself. So, when you're distracted, like, these sensations aren't like in the forefront of your mind. Like, when I lay down and it's completely quiet and I have nothing like distracting me, it feels like I'm doing this on a waterbed, trying to like go to sleep. So that's kind of how it feels when I'm, not in motion. And it's just this weird, like, discombobulated feeling. And so I was like, how do I have to like find things to do to keep me busy, so I'm not like focused on all of these like crazy sensations that I'm feeling. And so, yeah, dance. And then God told me to get a canvas and some paints, and I started painting. And
Had you
the
painted
things,
before? Like, were you an artist ever?
no, I remember painting one time. I had a miscarriage in my right before it was, I think it was like 12 weeks, and I was devastated. And that was the only time I painted. I painted on these 2 different canvases. I painted a tree, and on one canvas, it was like the branch and the baby bird, like in heaven. And then on this side was the tree with the mommy and the daddy bird. And it was all like dark and sad over here, you know, but the baby bird was over on the branch. It helped me heal. Like it really did help me like process that grief, along with getting a dog. That has definitely helped
Dogs
too.
help. Dogs help so much.
Yeah. And so I remembered that little like, and I was like, okay, yeah, like I'll give it a go. Like I'll try to paint. And I started painting these things that like God was showing me, like these visions and these beautiful like things. And through the past few years of like processing like my grief and my trauma, like I've been able to like paint and draw like some of these experiences. So yeah, I was having these beautiful encounters with the Lord, and I was drawing them and painting them. And then I got into like abstract paint, and I love the abstract art because I feel like it brought like order out of chaos, you know. And so I was like super attracted to abstract art too. And then I started crafting and making like decor for my house, and really making my little like place, my little slice of earth here that I've been given, that I spend like 90% of my time at. I just wanted it to be like a sanctuary. I wanted it to be a place, an oasis, and a place of healing. And so I've created this like beautiful little home, that I absolutely adore, and I love being here. And everyone that walks in this place says just they feel like the peace, and they feel the love, and you know, they feel the Lord in this place, and they, you know, it's a home. And I'm so blessed. Like I really am. And you know, that's again like that's just a small little example of like how God has blessed me through all of this, you know, in so many different ways.
I love too that the art was something that you gravitated towards. I've heard from so many survivors about just putting a pen in your hand, putting something in your hand, and just letting your hand go. It connects with the unconscious mind differently than talking does. And so you're able to express things different. And I think that's so amazing that intuitively that was just something that came to you was, oh, I need to, you know, stop talking, or I don't know the right words. I need to get this out a different way and express this way. And that it's been something
Yes.
that's healed you so much. I think that's so amazing.
I feel like art and dance, because dance is art.
Yeah.
And like art and writing and poetry and dance and you know, singing, all of this stuff, the way that I describe like what these have been for me is these have been creative tools that God has given me to give a voice to those things that are inside of me that I cannot verbalize, but I'm able to verbalize it differently in movement or in color or in a poem. And so I'm so passionate about like healing through the arts, because God is literally walking me through this journey right now. And art is a huge tool that he's used to help me process and to help me heal. And so it's something that I've become, you know, really, really passionate about. And, you know, and I hope one day, you know, to be able to pour into other survivors, whether it's like online, you know, access to like my classes, even like my Zumba classes, like it's free, confidential, and just a place for them like to start building their strength and their confidence. And then doing, I don't know, workshops, you know, like painting and writing and dancing, and or going to retreats and loving on these women and handing them the tools. And I mean, there's so many different there's so many different things that I know that God, you know, is showing me now in the process, that one day I am going to turn around and be able to help other people. And I think that's that vision that I had like 15 years ago. Like I see that I'm getting closer and closer to this girl, this woman, this strong woman that I saw. Like I am a strong woman. I've always been a strong woman, but to see a strong woman that's healed, it was a completely different kind of power and authority, a healed, strong woman. I saw what I carried, and I'm running after that because I know that, that God is going to use my story to hopefully help other people walk into their freedom too.
It's so beautiful. I love that. And that is exactly what you're doing. And you don't even realize the magnitude of just speaking out, the courage that I know that it's taking you to do this. It's not easy to talk about the hardest things in your life. Most people, when they go on any type of public platform, it's talking about the best things in their life. And, it's very vulnerable to talk about these things, but everybody has gone through something so hard. Pain and trauma doesn't know better or worse, or, our bodies react to small things and big things in very similar ways, and our body processes trauma in all the same ways, no matter what type it is. There just might be, degrees of that trauma that differ, and even dissociation. That's not something that always happens to people, but just the way that trauma stores in our body is very similar on every level long term. And you don't even realize the gift that you're giving people, speaking your story and sharing this valuable information and everything that you're doing. This story, this miraculous, beautiful walking miracle that you are. Like, you should not be here in this way today. You defied all odds. Most people that have lived through some type of horrific trauma like you have end up in crack houses or, prostitution, adult film, addiction, homelessness. You're an anomaly for what you've been able to accomplish, and these dreams that you still continue to have, and how you're building on this situation that wasn't something that you consented to, both the medical issue that you're dealing with and the abuse that you're overcoming. You didn't consent to either of those. Both of those were things that were very unfair that happened to you, but I love that you're looking at it and you're saying, you're not going to bring me down. Throw whatever you want at me and I'm going to overcome. I'm going to wake up tomorrow with a smile on my face. I'm going to make the best of this and figure out why it happened to me and what I can do with it and what beautiful thing I can produce from it. And I love everything that you're doing. I think it's amazing that dance found its way back into your life. I love that your story of finding art, even, that's a tool that I don't think a lot of people realize that is within us, that we can tap into anytime. And it doesn't cost a lot to grab, a couple markers or a little bit of paint, a canvas, even just picking up a pen and writing words, writing a poem on a notebook or a piece of paper. Those are tools that are so readily available to us, but they're not things that people, I believe, associate with healing. And you bring so much to the table. And I'm just so grateful for you being here today and us getting to see that beautiful smile and that compassionate heart and just what's possible on the other side of things that are so horrific, because that feeling of helplessness is so debilitating for people who don't think that there's any type of life on the other side. And it's like, here you are, like, yes, there is. I'm right here. I'm the example of that, and you can have anything that your heart desires. You just have to build that relationship. We have to connect with something that is beyond what our problem and situation is. We need to turn to God, and we need to look within. And like you said, who am I? If I'm not a nurse, if I'm not this, if I'm not that, what am I inside then? And we have to figure that out on such a deeper level than what, society portrays to us, where it's like, you need to have a job, you need to have this title to be important, you need to have money, and you need to have this. Well, is that really what makes us important? Is that really who we are at our core? And this conversation is just really important for people to hear. And your voice, Miss, you are gonna go so many places, and I cannot wait to sit in an audience one day and hear you tell your story and watch you dance. It brings tears to my eyes just even thinking about it. But I cannot wait for that day, and I know that that is 1,000,000% going to happen, and that you are going to change so many hundreds and thousands and millions of lives, both with giving a voice to people going through MdDS and people of complex trauma survivors that have gone through something so hard. And I'm just so proud of you and so honored that you chose to come on here and share. I know that this is very new for you to come out, and I'm just really honored that you chose to share with me and with this audience, and just your beautiful soul and walking miracle self. I'm honored to know you and call you a friend.
I feel the same way, Emma. I mean, yeah, you're the second person that I've felt safe enough to, this is a really big step, for someone, to come out publicly, like with all their dirt. And I saw your heart very, very quickly. And I knew that you were one of those people, that I wanted to bring my story through your platform before I put it anywhere else. Because it's so obvious, like, where your heart is. And I have watched you fiercely defend survivors, and I have gotten to know you through your chats, on, during your premieres. And like, you are reaching the world, you are touching thousands and millions, and there's so many people out there like me, that are starting to come, starting to their process of healing. And part of our process of healing is seeing other survivors and hearing their stories and watching their bravery. And it was all of these survivors that are bravely telling their stories. And I'm learning so much about my own story through it, that I was like, I can't hang on to this any longer. Like, I have to get this out there, because there's people out there that need to hear my story, so that it can resonate with their stories, and they can begin their journeys, and so really it's like a huge ripple effect that you are making in this world, and then our little ripples, like, imagine that, it's powerful. And this world is very broken, and it's become very evident for almost anyone that has their eyes open to see, like, that there's a lot of evil walking around this earth. And people need to know how to fight and how to war, like, and we are warriors, we're survivors, and we're warriors, and our voices are needed in this hour right now, when there's a lot of people that have been traumatized over the past few years.
Yeah.
And they're going to need to know, like, how to process their stuff. And when we're sharing our voices, like, we're sharing our tools. There's like a meme out there, and it says, what's it say? It's like your traumatic story is like somebody else's survival guide, or something like that. Like,
Yes.
but it's true, like, and so I want to say thank you. It's an honor to be on your platform and to share my voice here. And thank you for giving a voice to so many out there, and being a voice in this time when there's a lot of people out there that are looking for answers, and they're looking for a source of truth and light, and trying to make sense of the darkness in their lives, and to come to you. And you're such a bright, beautiful light, that really we need your light in this in this dark world that we live in. So thank you as well.
Oh, that means so much to me coming from you. You're so sweet. I feel like we're all these little puzzle pieces, and there's
Yeah.
no greater honor in my life, period, than, I mean, maybe being a dog mom. I do love my dog, but there's no greater honor to me than standing next to all of you. I would need to be that example if I want change in the world. It's just like we were saying, that starts within. If I am not happy with something, what am I going to do to change it? Or how am I going to contribute? And the thing that I'm realizing is we're all these little puzzle pieces. There's a big puzzle we're trying to put together about how this world actually works. And all of you have your contributions that fit with somebody else.
Yeah.
There's connections between a lot of you, might not be exact with everybody, but you each, are connecting these dots together. Oh, this location was a location I was at too. Oh,
Yeah.
that name was a name that I know. Oh, this way that this happened collaborates with the way that it happened to me. And I
Yeah.
think that that's amazing because not only is it validating, but they don't want you guys to figure out how their network works and to put
Yeah.
light. It's been hidden for so long, and you guys are digging it up and shining a bright flashlight on it, saying you're not hiding anymore. It stops with me, and it's going to stop with you. I'm going to make it
Yes.
stop with you. We're going to shine a light on this, and it's not going to be invisible to the world anymore. And I think
Amen.
that it's so powerful. There we have Satan's army on one side, fighting for their agenda, and then you guys are the angels swooping in and God's army, and I just think
Mm.
it's just amazing. I love seeing more and more of you coming forth and your bravery. I would have thought you've been telling your story for years and years and years and years. You're so brave and courageous and thoughtful and eloquent with how you talk about things, and I hope too that that inspires people to see that one day it doesn't get easier to where it's not emotional and maybe triggering to talk about things, but that's possible. If you can't talk about it today, it doesn't mean that you can't tomorrow
Yeah.
or the next day or one day, and just thank you for being that example. Thank you for being the change that you want to see in the world. Thank you for being the parent that you didn't have and the leader that you didn't have, and for just defying every single odd in every single way. It's
Mhm.
just beautiful. And like I said, I can't wait to see the ripple effect that your work is going to have and continue to have on the world. Now, where can people find you on social media?
I am on Twitter as Tiny Dancer Truther. And then you can find me on YouTube as Beautifully Broken. I have that stuff's more that YouTube is really for yeah, for like the chronic illness stuff. I just started it's called Dance Fit with Rachelle. It's a YouTube channel that I'm going to be putting my like little videos that I choreograph and stuff. Um, which will eventually be a whole like arsenal or of library of workouts for people. So, and some of those will be faith-based songs, and some of them will not be. Um, and then what else? I have a ministry. It's called Ashes into Artistry, and that is what eventually I'm hoping to bring, like the tools and the workshops and art and dance and whatever God calls me to do is going to be under the Ashes into Artistry. And you can find that on Instagram and Facebook. There's not a ton of stuff on there yet. I built it over the past couple of years, out of obedience, knowing that someday God was going to do something with it. And then so you can email me as well, especially if you have a ministry that caters to victims of abuse, and you feel like you would like to offer these people some creative tools, like hit me up. I'm open to volunteer with anybody, really. I just want to help. I just want to help people. So you can email me at Rachelle and kids with a Z at yahoo.com. And then keep your eyes open. Eventually there will be a book. that I am in the process of writing. So yeah, this was kind of like the first step in putting my story out there and learning how to use my voice. And then, the next step is a book, and I don't know the timing of that, but it's coming for sure. Yeah.
God's timing. It's always
Yeah,
divine. It's always perfect timing with his
exactly.
timing. Oh, that's so
Exactly.
exciting. I can't wait for all of that. Well, I'll link all of that below. That way people can just go click and go support you. And please go support Rachelle, you guys. She is just absolutely amazing. And as she was saying, her YouTube channel might not chronicle her abuse survival story, but you're going to learn a lot about these conditions that are affecting a lot of people around the world that don't have help, and maybe somebody out there one day will stumble on videos, or maybe there is somebody out there doing extensive research who can reach out. We don't know what other puzzle pieces are
Yeah.
floating out there and what resources, or so just getting eyes on that, and for our own due diligence to go learn about that. That's, I think, a really important piece too of Rochelle's story. So please go support her YouTube channel. If she has her dance video starting to be up, I'll connect that. But either way, I'll announce it. I'll repost it on YouTube and everywhere else, so you guys can go follow her. And I'm sure she'll post it on Twitter, and we'll have it everywhere once it is out. So look forward to that. And thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for supporting. We couldn't do it without you. It's an honor to have this show and to get to do this. And I'm so grateful that so many people care. And I'm so grateful that you guys care to sit and listen and learn,
Yeah.
and that you guys care to make a difference in the world also, even if it is just reposting or sharing a video, or liking something on YouTube or following a new channel. All of those things make such a big effect, because the outer enemy is trying everything they can to not have these stories be heard or supported or given a voice to or given attention to. So even just you taking this and sharing it with a friend, or following Rachelle on Twitter and reposting her stuff, you don't understand what a miracle it is that we even have that capability after all the years of silence that have gone. So all of those little things do matter. Don't think that they don't. If you're not doing something outrageous, it takes little things to make a big difference. So thank you guys so much for doing all of that. And thank you guys for tuning in, and God bless you. And we will see you next week.